Welcome to the Tesseract podcast, where we unlock your power to innovate. Our mission is to empower airmen, connect them to resources, and accelerate change across the Air Force logistics enterprise. Specifically, our team works as an innovation accelerator assigned to the Air Staff Logistics Directorate, where we partner with airmen to operationalize the new sustainment strategy. My name is James, and I'm going to be your host today. Hello, welcome to the Tesseract podcast. I'm Senior Airman James Durfler, and with me on the show today is Colonel Bary Flack with the 436 Mission Generation Group here at Dover. Colonel Flack, thanks for joining me on the show.
Thanks, James. Great to have you here.
So could you, this is kind of what we do for every guest here, could you run me through a little bit of kind of how you got to this spot that you're in currently, being a Mission Generation Group Commander?
Yeah, I think luck and timing really is the two words I can kind of think of. Dover is a unique place, number one. Got an amazing mission set here of airlift, maintenance, being a logistics hub, being a power projection platform on the East Coast. My background as a logistics readiness officer kind of lends to that. And so very lucky a few years back through the command screening board to get selected to come here to Dover back in 2021. And absolutely the best job I've ever had in the Air Force. Great airman, great mission. So when we got here, they asked us to say, hey, take a look at this Mission Generation Group concept, where we are trying to create synergy amongst logistics and maintenance to get after persistent mission generation, to see if we guys should do it a little bit better and cleaner on launching, recovering airplanes, moving people and things. So kind of luck and timing, but really just being here and being with an amazing team of airmen across the board has been a blessing. It's been awesome to be here at Dover to do this test on behalf of our Air Mobility Command.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to the difference between a Mission Generation Group and then, the alternative?
Yeah. So when you look at the core structure, specifically in Air Mobility Command, we've got maintenance group constructs at all the different airlift wings, Air Mobility wings. If you go back in time, you look at the joint basing, when this happened a number of years ago, they looked at how do we best capitalize on those forces and those airmen that actually truly lend itself to a central mission set of operating and launching airplanes from the flight line and moving people and cargo. So an Air Mobility Command is very unique. When you look at the 5 strategic aerial port squadrons that are in the command, you look at Travis, you look at McCord, you look at Dover, you look at Charleston and McGuire, you have maintenance group constructs, but has an aerial port squadron that's in that organization. What we're trying to do here at Dover is kind of change the paradigm on where does the logistics readiness squadron sit as it relates to launching airplanes, fleet health, supply chain management, all things as logisticians and maintenance officers that we hold near and dear to our hearts. So we've created an opportunity here at Dover on behalf of Air Mobility Command to test the concept of bringing logistics readiness squadron out of the mission support group and into the maintenance group construct and form what we call a mission generation group. Now, we are not a maintenance group. We are a mission generation group with maintenance activities, logistics activities, and aerial port activities. So it's not one and the same as you would look at a Travis, for instance, where they just have aerial port and they've got maintenance activities. So a little bit different, but our mission set's different. And looking forward to talking a little bit about why we're doing this on the follow-on questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
That you're speaking my language. One, because I come from an FGS where we had the decentralized material support in the shop there.
Absolutely.
But then also because our the Tesseract team sits in A4L, which is logistics and maintenance. So this idea of combining them into one common bigger goal and working together instead of kind of quibbling over pointing fingers or what have you, which
that's a great point. So let me talk about that finger pointing thing, right? Yep. I think we as maintenance and logistics, we tend to not understand each other's business sets. And it's easier to point a finger, not understanding why. Case in point, logistics would look at maintenance and say, I don't understand why they're doing that. Or conversely, why maintenance would look at logistics, specifically supply, and where are my parts? Why can't we get parts? So what we've built here at Dover is an opportunity for cross-collaboration and understanding and in a better environment where we could actually talk with each other, not at each other. And we're starting to see the benefits of that for betterment of understanding across the 2X AFSCs and across the 21X AFSCs. So very excited to see the potential what this group is bringing to bear in the future. I think the future is bright if we do things right, for the outset of the tests that we do have here.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of kinks to work out, but figuring it out.
Well, the kinks are there. I mean, whenever you do organizational restructure, because a lot of things have to do with cultural isms. We're used to operating in silos, and now what we're trying to do is break those silos to create a mission generator mindset where we're all thinking and doing together versus operating separately, but trying to get after the same thing, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah. So, another thing the test-reg team does, we do theory of constraints implementation, and you talk about this bigger goal and moving towards it. So, yeah, once again, speaking my language. Exactly. I would like to kind of focus on you brought it up there. Anytime you're implementing organizational change, there's a lot of downstream effects that you don't know, but there's usually some good reasons what goes into it.
Yeah.
Could you speak to any other time in your career that you kind of oversaw some significant organizational change underway?
I would say it's hard to say that I've seen or been involved with organizational change. Now, I've been in organizations where the cultures were not meshed in a way that we need to. I mean, case in point, when you look at aerial port squadrons and maintenance squadrons, now we look at things in a different view. Aerial port has a wide swath and a wider aperture of how they do their mission sets. So the airmen have a lot more latitude to do things to actually move cargo and things. So when you look at maintenance, very tech order driven, right? Very black and white. So a little bit different way with how we approach to make sure that we can produce an aircraft that's safe and reliable for crews. So what we're trying to do here with this test, is to try to blend the best of all of that into one organization. So it's hard to answer your question. This is the first real organizational change that I have been a part of, but it's been interesting over 25 years. I've been in the Air Force for 25 years. There's been a lot of different organizational changes that the Air Force has done, right? I mean, you just brought up a great point about the fighter generation squadrons. That's a recent change the Air Force has come to bear with. Now we're looking at air staff modeling, our fourth generation models that we're doing. So there's a lot of change in our Air Force. Obviously, there's a lot of folks taking a hard look at how we can be better set to meet the demands of the Indo-Pacific, specifically China as a pacing threat, and how can we be better set to actually generate mission to sustain our airplanes and our crews and our airmen who are out in the fight. So long answer to your very, very short question. But this is the first real organizational change that I have been a part of personally on behalf of our Mobility Command to build something new.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that's a good opportunity to be grateful for then to oversee something like this.
That's an amazing team here. It's easy to brag on the airmen at Dover.
Sure. They
truly care and they're impactful and doing a lot of great things on behalf of our country. One doesn't have to look back too far. Just look at February of last year, when Russia crossed the line into Ukraine. And our aerial port, the Superport here at Dover Air Force Base, has been central to a lot of great, lethal, non-lethal aid going to Eastern Europe to ensure Ukrainians have hope and they can actually have a fighters and punchers chance against Russia. Our ability to create opportunities with our C-17s and C-5s across the globe are second to none. So to be a part of this organization, just being in an airlift wing, to be a part of the mission generation group and seeing our airmen execute their mission every day is awe-inspiring. Yeah, it's really, really neat to see our airmen execute daily. But the organizational change that's ongoing at the same time has been a fun adventure, and I think we are going to be better for it in how we look at persistent mission generation in the future. And our airmen are ready for that challenge.
I'd like to pull on a few threads that you brought up there. So you mentioned that the maintenance is kind of tech order driven, meaning there's not as much room for discretion for a flight line maintainer when he's doing his job. Whereas the aerial port squadron, which used to be kind of a separate entity, or a more separate entity, I should say, they have not discretion is not the right word, but it's more like a breadth or a latitude of ways to go about their business. You're also talking about C-5s here, an aging fleet, and then you're talking about geopolitical pressures, like Russia. So could you speak more to that melting pot of extreme factors and how your airmen have overcome in the aging fleet issues, whether it be supply chain or kind of working or you as a leader taking maybe big steps in risk management to kind of meet the mission without compromise?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, our C5 is a wonderful airplane. Let me just say that up front. And, good old Fred likes to fly around, and it's a challenging airplane to maintain. It's a challenging airplane to sustain. It's a challenging airplane to resource to. Because it is an older airplane. It's big. It's gone through multiple modifications over the years. But couldn't be more proud of our aircraft maintenance squadron here and our maintenance squadron in our LRS for taking a look at sustainment, doing things a little bit outside the normal lens when you look at normal supply maintenance relations on trying to get a little bit better set in how we can sustain and supply the jet. But also, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the crews that we have here at Dover and how we partnered with the 9th Airlift Squadron in flying that jet across the globe. And we're showing the capability of the airplane. In fact, we just had a couple airplanes in Mobility Guardian from our Mobility Command. One of our tails and one of Travis's tails was out in the Indo-Pacific and did very well in sustaining the fight out there. But to go back to your earlier question about the challenges with the C5, it is a challenge in Air Mobility Command, Air Force Material Command, the Sustainment Center. A lot of folks are taking a hard look at how do we maintain this airplane, keep it viable, keep it sustainable over the years in the future. And there is a current initiative called the Drive to 55, which is basically getting to 55 aircraft available, right? Percentage rate based on the number of aircraft we have in the fleet. So there's a lot of people taking a hard look at how we can do things a little bit better, whether it's from program depot maintenance to the sustainment enterprise, from the supply chain operation wing to supplying us, supply chain management wing, you name it, but also to the field level. We own a lot of that. How can we do better at producing aircraft that are safe and reliable for our crews? So proud to say that our team has taken this initiative to get the C5 a little bit healthier very seriously. We're doing some back to basics in our maintenance production, whether that's forms management, whether it's how we engage with the crews so they understand the health of the jet, to how we work with our en-route partners to ensure that we have trainer aircraft going out in the system so our en-route maintenance personnel can have a little bit more time on the airplane. Because if we do actually have to go into a fight, whether it's in Europe or in the Pacific, we're going to need folks out that understand the airplane. But all that to say is there's a lot of really smart people taking a hard look at how we maintain and keep the C5 viable into the future. And we're very proud to be a part of that, to be part of the solution set.
That really just embodies the kind of like one team, one fight thing. The number of agencies and other organizations and is a lot. Yeah, is a lot. And it is an absolute, it's an amazing thing that these things are still flying at all.
Yeah.
But much more so that they're like the backbone of our logistics, and our mobility airlift enterprise.
Say this, I think it's important to highlight, these airplanes, whether it's a C5 or a C-17 or from your background, F-35, these airplanes fly in the backs of the maintainers. We've got amazing folks doing hard work and very smart work to keep this airplane in the fight against some very, challenging times when you think about it. And so I'm very proud of our airmen and I'm very proud of our maintainers here at Dover for keeping the C5 viable. They're doing wonderful work. So I'd be remiss if I didn't, give a shout out to the maintainers out there. They do excellent work out there. Thank you.
Heck yeah, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. So your LRO background, and you mentioned all these different kind of supply chain management, supply chain ops, the background to what actually keeps the C5 program running in any airframe. Have you had any experience directly working with them? If so, could you speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one of my dearest friends is actually supply chain operations group commander down at Langley, Colonel Jason Kalin, and we talk a lot about sustainment. And he works more on the fighter side, but I've got a very good relationship with my counterpart in the heavy airplane world, Colonel Ed Hogan, who's up at the supply chain operations group at Scott Air Force Base. And he's got a squadron there that we liaise with daily on MICAP parts for airplanes, and they're the ones who are the central node of trying to get all the parts out in the system for our LRS to actually be able to manage our part support to our maintainers. So whenever I have the opportunity, I've been to Scott a few times over the past couple of years. We always make it a point to stop by the supply chain operations group, specifically the supply chain operations squadron there, and say thanks to their airmen, because they're mission generators just as much as a logistics readiness professional here, or report dogs in the aerial port, or our maintainers. So it's hard. We want to make sure that they feel part of our mission, and they see the benefits of what they do every day to ensure that we've got the right part on the right shelf at the right time, so we can actually fix those airplanes and get them in the air to deliver hope when we have to. So I have a very good relationship, and I have a very good understanding of the supply chain system, because I've got excellent partners and support network in the supply chain operation wing that helps us maintain our jets with much needed supply.
That's awesome that you try to visit and bring them in to make it feel as if they're a part of your mission or of your team.
Important than the maintainers and the port dogs and the LRS folks here.
Absolutely.
They need to feel a part of that mission. So.
Yeah, they don't get to see the mission as directly.
Absolutely. Yeah, but that's why I think it's important we get out there and we message them and say thanks. I think that's the most important thing we can do to make them feel a part of the mission.
Sure. So the mission generation group construct is kind of consolidating existing things that were separated.
Yes.
So when you say that the supply chain operations squadron, or the SCOW, the wing level or the group level, any level, what are the kind of either common sense or more in the know barriers to, say, combining them within an organism or an organization like the MGG, right? What are the barriers to just reaching out laterally and including more, right? So, because you're all working towards a bigger goal ultimately.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, let me start at the field level and I'll go up.
Perfect.
One of the reasons we're doing the mission generation group concept in the test here is to flatten that communication chain, if you will, to the supply chain enterprise. When you think about the construct with mission support group that has the LRS, historically, sometimes you don't have someone at the group commander level that understands logistics or supply chain. And what sometimes would happen is it'd be like an up, over, and then out, if you know what I mean. Like the LRS would go to the mission support group commander. They would talk to the 06, maybe at the maintenance group that understands a little bit about supply chain, and then they would go up, right? This way, we actually have a cleaner line of communication and a command relation, if you will, with the SCOW. Having all logistics entities under one organization and one command. So we're starting to see benefit to that. And that's one of the reasons we're combining all the logistics entities, all the maintenance entities under one organization, is to try to flatten that communication up to the supply chain, so we can get faster results for our airmen, so we can launch airplanes at a better rate than maybe previously we could do, right? But you asked specifically about the SCOW, the SCOG, the SCOS. There was a reason the Air Force made the decision to centralize some of those entities into a supply chain enterprise, if you will, to take a look across, because what we're seeing now is we're seeing some sustainment concerns, specifically on aging airframes. C5 is a great example. I see it every day. And our airmen maintain that jet as best they can. But there's a reason the Air Force made a decision by putting together the SCOW, the SCOG, the SCOS, the supply chain management wings, all those really key organizations.
Hard to pronounce that one.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Doesn't look like SCOW.
They did it.
Yeah.
And it's because we need to have that focus on the supply chain to ensure that we can keep our aging weapon systems viable in the fight. The word right now is we're not getting rid of the C5s right now anytime soon. We're going to be flying that airplane for a long time. B-52s are going to be flying for a long time, right? The KC-135s are going to be around for a little bit. So we got some fairly old airframes that they're going to need some love and care. A lot of that has to do with how well can we manage from the sustainment standpoint. So I'm very comfortable with what the Air Force has done as it relates to sustainment and taking a look at how we organize from an enterprise-wide SCOW, SCOG, SCOS, et cetera, that lead into how they relate and how they build relationships with wing commanders at whether it's an airlift wing like us or myself, the mission generation group commander. so we can have those deep dialogues on how we can keep weapon systems viable and to keep our airmen, not grasping at straws, trying to figure out how they're going to maintain a fleet.
That makes a lot of sense. In your answer, conceptually, you're speaking to the fact that there's a need for flat organizations, but at the same time, there's a need for specialization in this kind of hierarchy. And that's kind of the tension that organizations face, big organizations, right? So when you find a target of opportunity, when you can consolidate, like what we're hoping the mission generation group turns out to be, that's like gold, and you got to seize that.
And the data is going to tell us if we're good or not, right? And we've over the last year and a half, just over a year now. Seems like yesterday we started this thing, and we're well into our second year. We're testing some very key integrated approaches and seeing what the data tells us. Whether our due and from maintenance rates go down, our order response times goes down, our red ball, fixed rates get better in 12-hour fix. I mean, there's a lot of key indicators that we're trying to measure as it relates to supply chain and our local supply chain and how well our fleet is doing. But I do think if we're taking a look at organizational constructs that are more functionally designed, what I mean by that is having 2x2, 1x AFSCs under one roof. How can we look at how can we make things better so we can actually have more unity of command and unity of purpose of mission generation. I can't help but think we're going to be better because of the organizational construct, because we got all the right folks looking at the right things to get after airplane health and sustainment and generation. So I'm excited to see what the end of the 2-year test brings us.
Yeah. I would love to get my hands on some of that. I have a data hobby, so I'd love to.
Got it. Being a maintainer, there's data all over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I lost my train of thought there.
It's okay.
Yes. So the traditional kind of AMU or MXG kind of construct, you hit on it, and once again, I just want to highlight it because it's very much like a theory of constraints thinking, which is awesome. That when you do consolidate this and put everyone under one shop, that you look at those kind of like maybe health of fleet metrics as an example, but something that points in the direction of directly towards sortie generation as a goal for all shops, distributed, not local efficiencies.
Yes. Now, one of the things is culture. Part of the reason we're doing this, one of the main reason is to see how much better we can be in mission generation, sustainment, those kinds of things. But one of the second order effects of what we're doing is the culture. How are we building all airmen? It doesn't matter what your AFSC is, have all airmen centrally focused on the flight line, right? And that's one of the second order effects of what this test is looking at, is how close do airmen feel, whether you're a ground transportation, expert or a POL fuel person or a port dog, you name it, maintainer. How closely tied do they feel to the mission set, which our center of gravity here is the flight line. Our goal is to make sure every airman in this group feels that they're a mission generator. Obviously, they're going to want to be a supply person. They want to be a 2T2, an air trans expert, right? I'm a 2-1R by trade, secondary 2-1A aircraft maintenance. But we are really trying to drive that culture in how we talk and how we speak and how we think as mission generators, where everyone is fully bought in and everyone's tied into that mission of launching airplanes so we can deliver across the globe. And I'm very comfortable in saying, if you're able to walk out of here and you walk into our DMS, or if you walk into ground transportation, you walk into base supply, you walk into the aerial port squadron, you walk into the aircraft maintenance squadrons, or you walk into our ISO dock and maintenance squadron, everyone will tell you they're mission generator. And that starts with, because we got excellent leaders in this group. Our squadron commanders are amazing. Our chiefs are amazing. And we constantly talk to the airmen about how important they are and what their impact is to our mission as mission generators. So the buy-in is there. Now we just have to see what the data tells us at the end of the test.
Absolutely. And the data is very important. I think that there's probably some intangibles that you won't be able to capture, but you'd want to capture about how people feel about specifically being mission generous and what they learned, what they went out of their way to learn and stuff like that.
I'm gonna pull down on that one a little. We were looking at the culture fairly heavily. Now that's not going to change, or that's not going to decide whether this organizational construct becomes a true Air Force organization of record, but culture is important, right? And we're measuring that through many different means. And in fact, we just had a doctor from BYU come out about a month and a half ago, and he's going to come back in the spring again, and he did interviews with airmen from all the different mission sets, all the different squadrons within our mission generation group, and ask very pointed questions about how they see things, how they feel things. By and large, the feedback was very good. There are some outliers there that, we still have a little bit of work. You're never going to get 100%. But overall, the tenor was overly positive of airmen feeling more tied to the mission here at Dover, specifically our mission to launch, recover airplanes and move people and things. So we're going to continue to measure culture because we think that's important, and because we do want airmen to feel more tied to the mission. And I think we're getting there with what we're doing with this group construct. The form and function of this group is really driving that cultural change of focusing on mission generation writ large across a large swath of airmen. And we've got 2,200 airmen in this group. It's a lot, but they feel tied to the mission. I'm very comfortable in saying that.
That's awesome. That is a lot of airmen too. That is a different kind of culture shift when you're trying to affect 2,200 people's day jobs.
Here's this again, and let me pull it. This is a great conversation. So logistics training squadron being in the mission support group, right? If viable, base operating support is obviously something that's very important. We take that important too. We still have some boss responsibilities from logistics training squadron, perspective, as well as some of the aerial port with traffic management, right? We do have some of those boss entities that we still have to maintain. So it was a heavy lift to the LRS coming over from a more of a base operating support entity, which is the mission support group, to a really an organization that's focused on the flight line to launch airplanes and to move cargo. And it took a little bit of time to get everyone kind of marching in the same tune, but couldn't be more impressed with how the logistics readiness squadron has embraced the opportunity of being a part of this organization. I'm very proud of that unit for embracing the opportunities we have in front of us.
I have a couple responses to that. First one is, as a 5-level crew chief, it was just outside of my capacity for thought to understand that like the LRS existed for anything other than the flight line, because it was, my only interface with them was walking in there and throwing some work on their on their plate in some capacity. Think of the rest of the base support mission. Hard for me to kind of like place in my mental model of a flight line. The other thing is that you said a year and a half that this has been going.
Just over a year.
Okay, just over a year.
We started in June of last year.
Okay, so by a lot of Air Force change time scale, it's overnight between when it started and right now, right? And the big thing about that is that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would guess that a hefty majority of the folks that were here when it started are still here.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
So a big challenge that I see coming up for you all is to carry the culture forward.
Yeah.
Is there anything specific that you're doing to kind of posture yourselves for the next group coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. Change is hard. And I'm going to lead in with this. We took a crawl, walk, run approach. And, I'm comfortable in saying we're in the jog mode between walk and run. The crawl was by design, because bringing a whole squadron of over 400 airmen out of one group, putting them in another, and then trying to say, hey, let's execute. We started a little bit slower in that because we didn't want to spook the herd, so to speak, right? Because we still have a mission to do here at Dover. And we wanted to make sure that we're taking care of airmen, number one. So we did a crawl, walk, run approach to this test. So what we've done is, through the form and function of the group, is we've got a lot of integration projects that we have put together. The way we run our morning old production meeting, I think what I'm talking about, the old production meeting. We don't call it that anymore. We call it the mission generation meeting. Everybody has a seat at the table. From all the DOs, from all the squadrons are at the table. So we've got the aerial port, we got the logistics readiness squadron DOs, and we've got usually the AMU OICs from both the C-17, C-5s, and obviously we've got our maintenance squadron. But we do that by design to have leaders at the table that are deciders. That's one great example of how we run, and it's changed the form and function of how we do this group. Secondly, we do a meeting every quarter called the Repair Network Enterprise Program. Really, how does maintenance and supply integrate, and how can we positively impact certain things such as our base operating stock levels. How do we look at DIFMs? How do we look at our drop 9s and drop 6s, those kinds of things, and how can we do things a little bit better? How we actually look at ourselves from a quality assurance standpoint. We've combined all the quality assurance entities from logistics readiness QA and the air transportation standardization evaluation program with our maintenance QA as far as how we look at things. From a mission generation approach. So we measure ourselves every quarter. We take a look at all the inspections to see what things can we make ourselves a little bit better. Then we also look at things, compliance wise together in meetings, from logistics, support, maintenance. And I think those forms and function just in meetings alone has changed the way we actually operate. We're able to plan better. We're able to communicate better. We're able to understand better. We're able to execute our mission better. But besides that, I mean, some of the integration projects we've been doing have been awesome. We combined our flight service center with DMS, called it DMX, moved it closer to the flight line, brought all those high hit parts that maintainers would love to have that used to be about a quarter to a third a mile away. Now it's at the point of need, so we're starting to see our order response time reduce. We've combined our LRS supply function with some of our receiving with TMO, our traffic management functions, to see what we can do a little bit better. We're in the midst of combining all our command and control entities from our fuel service center, our maintenance operations control, and our air terminal operations center into a mission generation operations center. So we're excited to see what that's going to glean of how well we can launch or recover airplanes on timelines. Those are just a few of many different integration projects we've done to try to create that culture and that form and function that's going to outlast personalities, right? Because you asked the question, how is this going to survive? It's about how we are doing the integration and how we're designing how we operate. That's going to make this thing run. It's not because Bary Flack's done this, right? I just happen to have the opportunity to be here when we did the test. But it's how the airmen have put together the integration projects and how we're executing our mission is going to make this thing last longer than it's going to survive me. I guarantee you.
That's amazing.
Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah. It's a
long answer.
No. I've got so many things to think about. I got to restructure them. No, you mentioned crawl, walk, run, and I was really excited to hear what you meant by that because as once again, speaking on behalf of junior enlisted folks, when I was given a job, I kind of just did it. And that was kind of the limit of my understanding of the scope of how maintenance gets conducted. Right. And at LOA, in 2021, I got to hear my own FGS commander brief about the FGS construct. Yeah. And he put a lot of things in context for kind of along the lines of what you're talking with the mission generation, the meeting for that instead of the production meeting, right? Which a cynical person would look at that and say like, oh, it's the same time slot as a production meeting, same room. Yeah. But the inclusion of people that weren't otherwise in it and creating a kind of one team approach is really good. I had the opportunity to go to MIT and do the Phantom Fellowship there, the AI Accelerator, which is really cool. And one of the biggest takeaways I have, which is funny because it's a very small thing, was that we got briefed by like a Lincoln Lab scientist, and he mentioned that the MIT magic was getting a bunch of people with a common goal and they're motivated and driven and just putting them into a room together and not necessarily having any expectations about what comes out of it. And that's kind of what you're speaking to, where you say, let's bring these people into the meeting and then we're going to have downstream, you'll have new ideas, new integrations pop up. That's amazing. Are any of those integrations, those projects you're talking about, when are those kind of created by your NCO, senior NCO, or?
Yes. And to answer your question, it's important that we have buy-in at certain levels, and it's important we have input from certain levels, because if you don't have that, it's going to be like, well, this is a top-down driven thing, and are people truly bought in? Now, again, I want to reiterate how awesome the team is here. Yeah, we've got. I've said it once. I'm going to say it again because I'm super proud of them. The squadron commanders that we have here are awesome. The chief master sergeants we have in this group are second to none. The senior NCO corps that we've got are awesome. But when you go out and about and you're driving on the flight line or walking in through our air freight terminal and you look at the young airmen, they're moving with purpose. They've got that steely-eyed look, which is pretty cool, right? Because they know that they're serving a higher purpose. So listening to them and acting on their ideas is how you win. So suffice it to say, we've had all tiers of airmen come up with certain ideas, how we've integrated across this group. Because if we do top down, sometimes that's not going to sell, right? So we have taken a lot of opportunities to get feedback from airmen and acted on their ideas of how we can do things a little bit different and better to get after mission generation here in the new form and function that we're creating. And I think that's one of the key reasons that we are doing so well is because we have buy-in from all the levels. So I'm kind of like a proud dad when you think about this and looking at how this group has come together and what they've done over the last year plus, and really up the previous year to that when we're starting all the staffing based on the request to do this test. It's been awe-inspiring. So it's pretty darn cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. Half of our team is with the theory of constraints, which is generally targeted leadership. Yep. And it is kind of, it's talking about process change in big ways, right? So it usually is kind of top heavy. And then the kind of airman ideation side is kind of from the bottom up, where we find that a lot of times an airman who is, say, walking too far to get a part routinely, and he's like, well, they could just put it in this DMS right here. Their feedback is very, very good. And it's often higher leverage, where it's a cheaper fix for a greater proportionally thing, but there's limits. It's like an optimization versus.
Yep.
So that's awesome to hear. And, we talked earlier about the metrics that support or don't support this. I wish there was some way to capture the kind of 5 or 10 year effects for the people that were a part of this experiment. Because you wonder.
Yeah. Fortunately, unfortunately, we get a 2-year time slot to get after this. And, we'll see what the end result will be. Obviously, we've got to brief our mobility command next spring and see if there's a final decision on if we want to keep this construct or go back the way it was, or, potentially if we think we need to test some more, maybe we'll ask for another year. We'll see how that whole thing goes. But I'm fairly confident in what we've seen thus far and kind of what we have put in place over the next 10 months. Is going to glean some very, very positive data. Now, whether we get the thumbs up or not, we'll see. But we're excited with what the future potentially holds with this construct. Yeah, and even if we don't get the nod, to become a mission generation group after the test, we're learning some things that we could still push throughout the Air Force to make things a little bit better as it relates to how maintenance groups and logistics can integrate, whether they're in the same group or not.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to kind of go with that. And that kind of speaks to the down the road thing, because you have your really probably from your NCO tier up and even your airmen get to witness, but then also kind of the lieutenant level and captain level. They're seeing this play out right in front of them.
Absolutely.
What is the kind of applicability of the MGG? Is that the other 4 big mobility hotspots that you mentioned, or is that also broader Air Force for anywhere that deploys cargo?
So you're looking to see if this gets accepted, what do we do in the future?
Correct. Yeah.
So I do know that Air Mobility Command is looking at 5 other bases that potentially could do this once the decision is made. If this is something the General Minahan wants to continue to pursue, my guess is. It may not be all Strat aerial port bases. We'll see what the Air Mobility Command wants to do. But I do know that they're looking at 5 different bases across the command to take a look at this organizational construct. And what our goal is, and I've told General Sanford this, is our goal is to have a playbook ready, hand it to whatever wing that wants it, right? Or whatever wing is going to be doing this, and say, this is how Dover did it. And this is how we think you can implement this organizational construct from form and function process that will enable better, cleaner mission generation at your base. So we owe that to the command. And so our goal is to have that published probably not long after the new year, to have it staffed up to AMC to take a look at.
That's awesome. So listeners of the show will recognize that I've talked about the complexity and what it means to say scale to the enterprise. Something that we use a lot in our language, because that's kind of our goal, is to bring things up to the appropriate level that they can, as widely used as possible if it's convenient, if it works. So that's good to hear, that even if scaling the MGG construct maybe only formally, and everything that it entails, has kind of a ceiling for what that means. Not that it's a small ceiling. Remind you, that'd still be like a Fortune 500 company if those few bases were put together and evaluated. Privatized. But then the lessons learned as far as, working with the LRS and the maintenance units and the back shop units all together. And that's something that can be spread kind of almost everywhere you can imagine. Really. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can do it in combat command. I mean, it can go across the Air Force, but we're starting to get in air mobility command. So we'll see what the decision is at the end of the test. Again, I've got my fingers crossed, but, and I'm seeing the goodness of what the airmen here at Dover have been doing. Very proud, and just, I'm saying it again, I'm awe-inspired with what our airmen have taken on over the last 2 years. From normal mission stuff, moving cargo, launching airplanes, but now also doing a full integration test on behalf of Air Mobility Command has been awesome. So it's been cool. We'll see what the future holds. But I've got high confidence that we're going to show goodness, whether this organization or construct change or not. We're still showing there's goodness with how we've integrated here at Dover. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to take a small left turn.
Absolutely.
I did some, pulling on the thread of organizational change or how structures affect kind of what actually happens at the kind of the ground level. I did some research on you, sir, and I know that you worked at a half A3 in Agile Combat Support as a younger officer, and that was the only. I may be wrong, but that was the only time that you worked in kind of the A3 sphere.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
I mean, yes. Yeah. I mean, that's fair to say. But I've been in Air Mobility Command most of my career and worked for many a mobility pilot too.
So, and obviously in AMC, A3 and A4, tighter in some ways. Yeah.
Specifically on the ops maintenance. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, what was it like as a younger officer working in A3 on Agile Combat Support?
Very unique time, right? So you're taking me back 13 years. Thank you. I feel a little younger. So graduated from Air Command Staff College, went to the Air Staff, and had an opportunity to work on A3. I worked with a lot of rated guys, obviously, from a wide swath across the Air Force too. We had, fighter pilot, bomber pilots, we had C-130 guys. Pretty interesting. And it was at a time that we're trying to incorporate in really spread across the Air Force the thought of irregular warfare, and how do we frame that mission set, but also not forsake the Agile Combat Support pieces of that, right? So Air Advisor Academy was something that I'm proud to say that we developed during that time, because at that particular time in our history, we had a lot going on with Air Advisor missions, whether it be it in Iraq or Afghanistan. So very interesting time. But it was a lot of fun working with all those guys. It was pretty cool to be the only non-rated guy on that staff. More often than not, it was kind of neat, whether they thought they had to listen to me or not, but they would more often than not listen to me on certain things, specifically when it came to Agile Combat Support. Which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, the air staff was awesome. It was a great experience. A lot of good memories from my time there. And I love working with rated officers. I absolutely do. And but they do like to look at a logistician. And they do like to ask questions. And they do like to listen sometimes to what we have to say. Well, most times I would say when it comes to Agile Combat Support, logistics, mission generation, those kinds of things. So yeah, you took me back a few years. I've got stories, some of which I probably can't say on this channel. Yeah, it was a blast. It was good. It was a good time to work in the A3.
That's awesome. From my experience, rated officers, because they are, domain experts, they have a respect for expertise.
Absolutely.
Which is nice. So, with one LRO on the staff, they probably look to you for all sorts of questions that maybe you couldn't give an answer.
I mean, I'll go back to I was deployed for a year during that time too. I went to LUD, and I was in the Air Mobility Division at the CAOC, and I had 21 aerial port and LROs working for me. We did all the intra-theater airlift stuff, but we were working for all the rated guys. And it was awesome to be a part of that mission set, moving, cargo and people throughout CENTCOM. But more often than not, they would call the port guys on the staff, or they called the LROs saying, hey, what can we do? And we would give them answers like, sounds good, let's go, right? Let me fast forward to now. I've had 2 wonderful wing commanders here at Dover, and one just left. We just gained another one. And more often than not, they look at the mission generation group for answers, because there's always a logistics question. There's always a question about sustainment. There's always a question about airplane health. There's always a question about cargo movement, and how are we working and integrating with U.S. Transportation Commander, or how are we working with the Joint Munitions Command on moving lethal aid to Ukraine. They look at our group and they look at the logistician, because we're the ones who get the answers. So 100% agree with your thought. And it's been awesome to work with a whole bunch of great Americans who happen to be rated officers. I've had a great time in doing that. Yeah, thanks for bringing me back. I feel.
Oh yeah. That I didn't actually think about that, but from the leadership perspective, you probably have a lot more. I don't want to say as if you didn't have say before, but combining both the logistics and the maintenance, you have especially in Air Mobility Command, you got a lot of stake, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Air Mobility Command, I mean, what are we here to do? I mean, General Minahan's been very forthright with our mission set. When you're thinking about Indo-PACOM, look at Mobility Guardian, what we just did. Our job is to explode into theater, is to move force and to maneuver force. And it's logisticians that help plan that, along with our rated officers to get after how do we move large swaths of cargo and large swaths of forces, and then when you look at what we're trying to do in the Indo-Pacific, a lot of things we can't talk about because there's classification issues. But our job is to ensure that we take a look at the plan, and give our true assessment of how we can do that plan, and then and to meet commander's intent, and General Minahan's intent is to explode into theater if and when that calls. And that's on the backs of maintainers and loggies, and our awesome air crew. We got some amazing air crew in Air Mobility Command.
One team, one fight.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. One last question.
All right.
What is the best part about being in the Air Force?
Airmen, without doubt. I just got done with a lunch with the other group commanders and the vice commander. We meet monthly and we go for a lunch. And a few of those folks are, getting ready to leave the Air Force. They're getting ready to retire after a number of great years. And, we're just talking. And, when I look back at my time in the 25 years of this Air Force, I think about the mission a little bit, but I think about the people a hell of a lot more. And it's just the airmen that you come in contact with. And, I mentioned it earlier today or earlier in our conversation. You just go out and walk around the flight line. You go out into the air freight terminal, or you go into the POL yard, or you go into the warehouse, and you see these young kids, 18, 19 years old, and they've got goals and aspirations. And to see them operating with a sense of purpose and a sense of pride, I mean, it's pretty awe-inspiring to be their teammate. And put simply, the best part of the Air Force to me is how awesome our airmen are. I mean, I absolutely love them. And so sorry, I'm getting a little teary-eyed just thinking about them, but I absolutely love every airman in this group. They move heaven and earth to ensure that others have hope across the globe. And it's pretty cool to be a part of their team.
Colonel Flack, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, James. I appreciate it. It's awesome to see you, man.
Likewise. Thank you so much for listening to the Tesseract podcast. This show is how I started to learn about enterprise-level strategy and the innovation ecosystem within the Air Force, and I hope we passed along some learning to you with this episode. If you'd like to engage with our team, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and connect with us on LinkedIn. Any references to trademarked, copyrighted, or protected products or services such as books, movies, or businesses are used here for the limited purpose of education and professional development of Air Force Airmen. If you have any questions, please contact us at www.tesseract.af.mil.